Well, Governor Josh Stein, thank you so much for making time. Always good to see you. Let's get right into it here because you asked FEMA to extend its 100% cost share for 6 months for eligible costs related to Helene costs. So, for example, that would be a big focus of that is debris removal. Early this month, FEMA denied that extension, saying the increased level of funding is, quote, not warranted. Were you surprised to get that denial?
Honestly, I was surprised. I was disappointed. I absolutely believe that North Carolina deserves to have 100% coverage of debris removal for another 6 months, and even 3 months is better than nothing at all. Here's the deal. The amount of damage that Western North Carolina experienced is without any precedent in North Carolina. The amount of debris that we have already removed from our waterways, our roads, is more than enough to fill 3,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Just millions of cubic yards of debris. We are nowhere near done. We think there may be as much uncollected as has already been collected. And the fact of the matter is the federal government has provided 100% reimbursement for debris removal in other storms, Katrina, Maria, Ike. This has happened before, and Hurricane Helene's impact on North Carolina is absolutely in keeping with the extent of damage those places, the states and Puerto Rico, experienced. And the fact of the matter is it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars potentially to the state. And every dollar that we don't get reimbursed by the feds for this is $1 less to help a small business, to help a homeowner. So we need these funds desperately.
Well, and you touch on a lot that I want to get to, but I'll emphasize that FEMA is still matching 90% of eligible costs. But as you mentioned, that 10% that now is not included, as the governor's office, as you have said, could be hundreds of millions of dollars. In your letter that you sent to President Donald Trump, you have said there's been a major increase in debris removal by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers under the Trump administration, but there's still a lot left to do. And that the denial of this match is already hampering the state's recovery efforts. Look, the state has allocated significant money to go towards Western NC following Helene. But if this match is not extended, will there need to be more quick emergency help from the state?
It's unclear. The state has stepped up to some degree. They provided us some matching funds. They provided some debris removal funds. But what we want to do is make sure that we're maximizing the dollars that the state has for purposes that the federal government simply will not cover. Every pot of money that the federal government provides, there are a number of them, and they're all desperately needed, they come with a lot of restrictions on them. The state money is much more flexible. So a dollar that the state has to spend on debris removal, when that's something that the federal government typically pays for, that is more than the dollar cost to the state, because it's a flexible dollar, a dollar that can really make a difference in communities in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, you mentioned, as you just mentioned, Governor, in this letter, you talk about how FEMA has extended the 100% match. You look at Hurricanes Katrina, Hurricanes Maria. This was supported, the letter that you previously sent was supported by the majority of the congressional delegation, Democrats and Republicans. Have you had conversations with any of those members about supporting this new letter that asks to appeal this denial by FEMA?
Yeah, we've been in touch with the delegations, and I expect that they will be supportive of this appeal. Obviously, it's up for them to ultimately decide that, but we've gotten encouraging words, indications from the congressional delegation. They were unanimous in supporting our request on the front end. They understand how big the damage scale is in Western North Carolina. They understand that this extent of the storm is much more than the state of North Carolina can bear on its own. They understand the federal government needs to do more. They helped us at the end of December last year get a $110 billion federal aid package, of which North Carolina got a portion. We don't know exactly what our share will be, plus 13 billion plus or minus a couple billion, which is kind of crazy to say that. But we just don't know because many of the agencies have not yet allocated North Carolina its state share. The EPA has and HUD have, but the other agencies have not yet. So we don't know what we're going to ultimately get. But what we do know is that we need many, many billions more from the federal government. I submitted a request for $11.5 billion in new appropriations, and $7.5 billion in allocations from previous appropriations. And we're urging our congressional delegation to be arm in arm with the state in making this request of Congress and then of the administration.
Well, and I can tell you, I spoke with Republican Congressman Chuck Edwards, who represents Western NC, last week. He told me he would consider signing on to an appeal to this this denial. Look, let me turn to this because, recently we saw just last week the state of Arkansas, which had deadly tornadoes back in March. It received a rejection from the Trump administration on basically getting federal support. When you look at that, and there's been some reporting that FEMA may change and raise the bar for getting federal disaster assistance following a natural disaster, how concerned are you, and are you worried that the level of federal support won't be there that maybe it once was?
There is no one in government, frankly, in the country who can feel a sense of security or certainty in what the federal government will do. I mean, the federal government has been changing its policies very quickly, without a lot of explanation, even taking back money that they have contracted with the states to provide, and the states have made commitments based on those contracts. And so I don't think anyone can have any certainty. If FEMA were to change and substantially raise the bar of federal support to states after natural disasters, it will be a major setback because the scale of these storms are so vast. $60 billion is the amount of damage that Western North Carolina experienced from Hurricane Helene. The entire state budget of North Carolina for a year is $33 billion, just to give you a sense of the scale. So the only institution that has the resources adequate to help states recover is the federal government.
There has been obviously a significant increase in federal costs that have been incurred after natural disasters, given there's been so many natural disasters. There's been a call in the past for FEMA to kind of look at whether it needs to change. You go back to 2019, the acting FEMA administrator said that the current federal spending on natural disasters is unsustainable. Is there more that a state can do, North Carolina in this case obviously, can do financially to prepare for these types of disasters?
Well, we have to be resilient. We have to have updated flood maps. Part of the problem with Western North Carolina's experience with Hurricane Helene is, honestly, we didn't know what would happen with this amount of rain because it had not ever happened before in modern history. Eastern North Carolina, we have a better sense of what the flood mapping looks like, so we know how to encourage municipal property, businesses, and homeowners to take mitigation steps so that if there's a storm that comes, they can escape the feeling the brunt of that damage. A lot of times it's raising a building. A lot of times it's moving a building. These are things that we can do when we understand what might happen. We have been aggressively mapping Western North Carolina now in the wake of Hurricane Helene so that we can be better prepared in how we rebuild so that we are more resilient, so that if there is a rain event like this again, it will not have the same scale of damage.
Well, Governor, this all comes as the Trump administration, there are serious conversations about whether to eliminate FEMA. You heard the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem say just a few weeks ago she will eliminate FEMA. Now, how that plays out, what it looks like even legally in terms of the congressional oversight and role in that is unclear. But does the state have the resources to operate or handle a natural disaster without FEMA, whether it's called FEMA or not having any sort of federal oversight, federal role in terms of natural disaster response?
FEMA is imperfect. We all know that. We've all had our own frustrations with dealing with FEMA. I know individuals in Western North Carolina had frustrations. So we can make FEMA better without ending FEMA. FEMA plays an important role. It needs to be more agile in getting money to communities quicker. And I am coming up with a series of proposals that I hope to engage with other governors on to the Trump administration on ways that we can make it more efficient, make it more streamlined, get money to towns, get money to individuals quicker, have better communication so that people understand what FEMA can and cannot do, have unified application so that when you're applying to FEMA, it will also apply to the Small Business Administration. So these are things that we can do to make FEMA better. If we lost FEMA, it would be a real problem. That we don't have a means as a state to get individual assistance to homeowners in that week immediately after the storm so that they can go to a hotel or they can go buy groceries or buy clothes to replace those that were lost in a storm. These are things that the federal government has done, and we need them to continue to do.
Well, in fact, there is that FEMA Review Council right now that is supposed to be looking at potential changes to the agency, you know, so we'll see what comes of that. The state did recently get news from the Department of Housing and the Housing and Urban Development, excuse me, which approved a $1.4 billion grant to help Western North Carolina. I know you were involved in that. I know there were members here in Congress from North Carolina, Republican and Democrat, including Senator Ted Budd, who wanted that. What will that mean for Western North Carolina?
It's a really good sign. So North Carolina submitted our request, our action plan, to HUD faster than any other state that was impacted by Hurricane Helene. In fact, faster than any state after a major hurricane in at least a decade. So my administration, I've given them 4 values: urgency, focus, transparency, and accountability. So I want us to do everything as quickly as we possibly can. Once we submitted our action plan weeks ago, the entire congressional delegation wrote to HUD urging them to do a similarly quick review. And I'm gratified that the Trump administration has approved our action plan. We now need to negotiate the contract, so we still don't have access to those dollars yet. That's why my partnership with the North Carolina General Assembly is so important, because they passed a $500 million, $524 million Hurricane Helene relief bill a couple months ago, which enables us to start on the housing reconstruction program this summer, whether or not the federal money has started. And so what we want to do is start home reconstruction this summer. If we waited until late fall to get started, which is quite typical, it's actually rare for housing programs to begin within a year of a storm. If we waited till the storm, which was September 27th, as you head into winter in Western North Carolina, you would lose an entire year of building season. So that was unacceptable to me, it was unacceptable to my team, and I'm gratified to see that the administration has acted quickly on our action plan.
Well, Governor, let me just come full circle here, because you talk about that housing money that will be coming to the state. You talk about that the president's first trip when he was inaugurated was to Western North Carolina. You were there. I've talked with the Asheville mayor, who has said in recent weeks they have seen a really significant increase in debris removal. On the flip side of that, you've got cuts to the CDC and AmeriCorps, people that were working on Helene recovery in Western NC. You talk about the denial of the extension of this match. And then there are concerns from a number of local government officials that federal money isn't coming quick enough. You look at all of that. The president is marking 100 days in office on Wednesday. How do you grade the Trump administration's handling of Helene recovery?
Well, I think you just, in your question, did a perfect synopsis of the state of the situation. There have been things like debris removal, where there has been renewed energy since the Trump administration came into power. But then to pay for that debris removal, they've now said that we're going to have to pay potentially up to hundreds of millions of dollars for the state to do it instead of the federal government. So it's good on one hand, but it's not good on the other hand. There are other things, getting rid of AmeriCorps volunteers, which have been playing an instrumental role working with nonprofit organizations in Western North Carolina to help on home reconstruction, to help on logistics of moving needed resources to individuals, families, communities in the western part of the state. So there are things which we have concerns about, but then there has been speed with HUD approving the action plan. My job as the governor of North Carolina is to do everything I can for the people of North Carolina, including the folks in the western part of the state. So I'm going to urge the federal government to be my partner, to be the state's partner in this work. When they do right by Western North Carolina, I will thank them for that. When they have not done right by North Carolina, I will tell them that they should do better. And that's exactly what I will continue to do.
Yeah, and it all comes as the Trump administration basically makes this argument that FEMA specifically, more power should be in the hands of local and state officials because they have a better control of this. How that plays out, we'll wait and see. Governor, real quick before I let you go, switching gears, as you know, Governor, one person was killed and 6 others were injured Sunday morning at a shooting on the campus of Elizabeth City State University. I know you've spoken with the chancellor and the police chief. Is there anything you can tell us about that shooting and your thoughts regarding that?
Just heartbreaking. It was a campus party. Kids were having fun. We want kids to have fun in college. I have a child in college, but it should never, never devolve to violence. And unfortunately, some folks who were not students brought guns to this party, and bullets started flying. And tragically, a Elizabeth City State, as a college student, but not Elizabeth City State, died. 4 others were shot. Fortunately, none of those appear to be life-threatening, but it's heartbreaking, and we've got to do better.
Yeah, all thinking about that university campus, all of us here as well. Governor Josh Stein, appreciate your time as always, and please keep us updated what you hear from the White House on the request to appeal that denial.
We surely will.